king and his men stole the queen from her bed and bound her in her bones. The seas be ours, and by the powers where we will we roam. Yo ho, all hands, hoist the colors high. Heave ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die.
All right, what's going on? Time for another night of pirate history. For anybody that's joining us for the first time or might have just found this show and you're listening later, welcome. This is our 9th episode. All these episodes go into a playlist here on this channel, so definitely go back and check them out. Get a full history, starting back with the Buccaneers, all the way through into the golden age of piracy where we are now. While telling these stories, or really the stories that we tell here, are all based on first accounts, first-hand accounts of people that were there and either wrote their own diary or passed their stories along. And some of them are mixed in with information from court cases, fought and hung. So we go through the true accounts and histories of the pirates and Buccaneers. It's good to see everybody here. Let me take a look through the chat real quick. What's up, Sharon? Always good to see you. What's up, MRE? Good to see you too. Maureen, hope you're well. A couple of different accounts in here I think belong to some of the other people that I already know. What's up, Just Me? Good to see you, Foolish Flock. What's up, Mob Rat Hunter? All right, cool. It's good to see everybody. Yeah, I was in there earlier too, Emery. I caught their show as well. So I saw a question in here towards the top. I think it was MRE said, who are we covering this week? This week we're going to do Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the two famous female pirates of that age from Nassau, sailed with Jack Rackham. So in the last couple of weeks, right, we went through Charles Vane. Actually, we went through Blackbeard, then Charles Vane, and Jack Rackham. Blackbeard being obviously out of Nassau after being a privateer, given his ship by one of the people, Hornigold, who had helped found the pirate kingdom of Nassau. And, Vane, who ended up being a martyr in Nassau, who had his own run-in and hang out with Blackbeard. Of course, Jack Rackham was Vane's quartermaster and deposed Vane. So we are going to continue on with that line of people, if you will, right? We went from Blackbeard to Vane. Rackham was with Vane. Now we're going to cover Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who sailed with Rackham. A couple of new names in here I've never seen before. Hopefully everybody's well, having a good night. Starting off with our intro as always. So we are going to, we do two things during these shows. We smoke weed and we talk about pirates, right? So we are going to get one half of that going now. I've already got this thing packed up and ready to go. So everybody out there, if you've got it, smoke it. If you're having a drink, pour a new one. If you don't do none of those things and you're just listening, then kick back for a moment while we all do our thing. And we will dive right in to the story of Mary Read first. And these two stories will be coming out of the what's called a book that's called A General History of the Pirates, written by Daniel Dafoe, who was a map maker. As I've explained in previous episodes, he would gather together court cases and stories from the sailors that came in there, even William Dampier. And the first author from some of our first episodes, Alexander Esquemeling, a Hollander who sailed out of France in 1666 and landed in Tortuga in the same year. MRE says, none for me tonight. I got you, man. Yep, smoke, toke, and talk about pirate blokes. Well put. There you go. Yeah, just rolled one. Permission to come aboard. Come on, man. Let's go. It's a nice night for a sail. A little story time. All right. Yeah, I was shaking, he says. That's too funny. All right, here we go. The life of Mary Read. So now we are to begin a history full of surprising turns and adventures. I mean that of Mary Read and Anne Bonny, alias Bon, which were the true names of these two pirates. The odd incidents of their rambling lives are such that some may be tempted to think the whole story no better than a novel or a romance. But since it is supported by thousands of witnesses, the people of Jamaica and those who were present at both of their trials, all of these people know the stories of their lives. Upon the first discovery of their gender, the truth of it can no more be contested than that were such men in the Blackbeard who were pirates. Mary Read was born in England. Her mother was married young to a man who was used to the sea, who, going a voyage soon after their marriage, left her with child, which child proved to be a boy. As to the husband, whether he was cast away or died in the voyage, Mary Read could not tell. But however, he never returned again. Nevertheless, the mother, who was young and airy, met with an accident, which has often happened to women who are young and do not take a great deal of care. She soon proved to be with child again, without a husband to father it. But how or by whom, none but herself could tell, for she carried a pretty good reputation among her neighbors. Finding her stomach grow, in order to conceal her shame, she took leave of her husband's relations, getting out that she went to live with some friends of her own in the country. Accordingly, she went away and carried with her her young son at the time, not but a year old. Soon after her departure, her son died, but Providence in return was pleased to give her a girl, of which she was safely delivered in her retreat, and this was our Mary Read. Here the mother lived 3 or 4 years, till what money she had was almost gone. Then she thought of returning to London, and considering that her husband's mother was in great money, she did not doubt but to prevail on her to provide for the child, if she could pass it upon her for the same. But she would have to change this little girl into a boy. Okay, see, so this young lady had a husband, had a baby boy. The husband never comes back. She ends up sleeping with somebody else, gets pregnant again. she doesn't know, or she's the only one who knows who the father is, but he's not in the picture at all. So she fucking takes off, right? She was living with her husband's family, but she takes off because she's starting to show her pregnancy. She basically spends all the money she has. She's gone. Now she's destitute and needs money to raise her girl. Her baby boy died, right? So her original husband, whose family she was living with, right? That boy that's related to that family has died. She now has this baby girl that came next. She's out of money. Her last husband's family, who she was living with, right? And they were helping take care of their grandson. Now that grandson's dead and she has a girl, if she wants to return to this family, she's got to convince them that this little girl is their grandson, is actually a boy. That's really fucked up predicament and really messed up. But changing the girl into a boy seemed a difficult piece of work, and how to deceive an experienced old woman in such a point was altogether as impossible. However, she ventured to dress the girl up as a boy, brought it to town, and presented it to her mother-in-law as her husband's son. The old woman would have taken it to have bred it up, but the mother pretended that it would have broke her heart to part with the baby, so it was agreed between them that the child should live with the mother, and the supposed grandmother should allow money each week for the child's maintenance. Wow. So she actually did convince this old lady that her new baby daughter was actually this old lady's grandson. And when the grandmother wanted to just take the baby and take care of it, the mother said, no, it'll break my fucking heart to part with my baby. So the grandmother says, okay, fine. Well, the child can live with you and I'll give you a little bit of money each week to take care of the kid. Thus, the mother gained her point. She bred up her daughter as a boy. And when she grew up to some sense, she thought proper to let her into the secret of her birth to induce her to conceal her gender. Right. So basically, once she got old enough, she had to tell her the truth and then convince her to keep her fucking mouth shut and keep acting like a boy so that they'd keep getting money from the grandmother. All right. It happened that the grandmother died, by which means the subsistence that came from her ended, and they were reduced in their circumstances. So they were getting worse and worse off, right? The grandmother was giving them money every week. Now she's died. She's not sending them money. So their circumstances are getting worse and worse. Wherefore she was obliged to put her daughter out to wait on a French lady as a footboy, being now 13 of age. So they got poor, and the mother just fucking makes the daughter at 13 get a job waiting on some French lady as a footboy. This lady fucking sucks, man. Wow. This lady really fucking sucks. All right. Here she did not live long, for growing bold and strong, and having also a roving mind, she entered herself on board of a man of war, where she served some time, then quitted. Went over into Flanders and carried arms in a regiment of foot as a cadet, and though upon all actions she behaved herself with a great deal of bravery, yet she could not get a commission, they being generally bought and sold. Therefore she quitted the service and took on in a regiment of horse. She behaved so well in several engagements that she got the esteem of all of her officers, but her comrade, who was a Fleming, happened to be a handsome young fellow. She fell in love with him. Okay, this shit is all kinds of crazy. All right, so the grandmother dies when she's 13 years old, right? And she's been acting like a boy her whole life, but her mom finally tells her, hey, listen, this is the deal, right? I passed you off as this boy that died. That's not really your grandmother, but we need her money to live. So you need to keep up your shit and keep your mouth shut. So I guess she does. The grandmother dies. The mom makes her get a job waiting on a French lady as a footboy at 13. And finally she said, fuck this. Now check this out. She's been living her whole life as a boy. So she just keeps living her life as a fucking boy. And she actually she left that French lady job and her fucking mom, probably best off. I mean, her mom fucking sucked. But she entered herself on board of a man of war as a soldier, where she served some time, then quitted it, went over to Flanders and carried arms in a fucking foot regiment as a cadet. Behaved herself with great deal of bravery. Then she joined the regiment of horse, where she got the esteem of all of her officers, got a bunch of awards in different engagements. Then she fell in love with one of her fellow soldiers that was a friend of hers. She, I mean, it's natural. She's a woman, right? At this point, obviously, she's been through all these wars and shit like that. She's obviously grown and mature. She left at 13, joined a fucking man of war, served in all these different military regiments, did really well, is obviously brave, knows how to fight, but she's still a woman, right? At this point, at the very least, a young woman. Perfectly natural. She falls in love, it says, to a handsome young fellow that was her comrade. And from that time, grew a little bit more negligent in her duty, so that it seems Mars and Venus could not be served at the same time. Her arms and accoutrements, which were always kept in the best order, were now quite neglected. It's true, when her ordered out upon a party, she used to go without being commanded, and frequently ran herself into danger where she had no business, only to be near him. She's like stupid in love with this guy. She's like, even when he gets caught to go and do patrols and go and like do fights, even when she's not committed, she goes so she can be near him and help keep him safe. And she's putting herself in danger. The rest of the troopers, little suspecting the secret cause which moved her to this behavior, thought she was fucking crazy, and her comrade himself could not account for this strange alteration in her. Well, obviously, dude, you don't, right? He doesn't yet. He's like, why is this fucking dude always so worried about me? That's weird, right? I bet he's probably like, what the fuck, dude? So they all thought she was crazy. This dude's like, what the fuck? He could not account for this strange alteration in her. But love is ingenious. And as they lay in the same tent and were constantly together, she found a way of letting him discover her gender without appearing that it was done with design. Okay, so she made it. She wanted him to figure out that she was a woman, but she wanted to make it seem like he just found out on his own. Okay. Well, this next sentence is like the most obvious thing in the fucking world. He was much surprised at what he found out, and not just a little pleased, taking it for granted that he should have a mistress solely to himself while at war, which is an unusual thing, obviously, in a camp, since there is scarce one of those campaign ladies that is ever true to a troop or company, so that but gratifying his passions with very little ceremony. But he found himself very strangely mistaken, for she proved to be very reserved and equally modest, and resisted all of his temptations, and at the same time was so obliging and insinuating in her carriage that she quite changed his purpose. So far from thinking of her only as his mistress, now he wanted to court her for a wife. Well, there you go, bro. She's not, right? She's not a hua, right? She's a good girl. She likes you. She's in love with you, right? But she's like, I'm not just here so you can fucking like hump on me and shit like that while we're, fuck that. Like, if you like me, you like me. If you don't, you don't. So that, good for her. It says she resisted all of his temptations. She was very reserved and equally modest, but also obliging and insinuating in her carriage, which meant she let him know that she cared about him a lot. And that changed his purpose, right? So instead of him only thinking of her as a mistress, he now thought of her as a possible wife. This was the utmost wish of her heart. In short, they exchanged their promises, and when the campaign was over and the regiment marched into winter quarters, they bought women's apparel for her with such money as they could make between them, and were publicly married. Wow, imagine that. She's been dressed as a boy her whole life. Think about that, right? since she was a baby. Her mother's been dressing her, raising her, and treating her like a boy. So that's the only, and then when she left, she joined all these different military regiments where she was dressed as a male, right? So now this is the first time. I mean, I'm sure at some point in her life, she probably got a hold of some girls' clothes and tried them on and stuff. Don't get me wrong, but this is the first time she's in public. Like, she's going full on public as a woman, and she bought women's apparel with her. Well, what's going to be her husband. It says they were married publicly. That's wild. I bet all the other people in their regiment that found out were like totally fucking flipping their wig, right? They were probably freaking out when they got back and she put a dress on and they got married. They were like, what the fuck? Or maybe she just appeared and they didn't tell them, right? And they were all wondering what happened to dude. The story of two troopers marrying each other made such a great noise that several officers were drawn by curiosity to assist at the ceremony. And they agreed among themselves that every one of them should make a small present to the bride towards housekeeping in consideration of her having been their fellow soldier. Well, that's good. Awesome. So they accepted her and treated her well. That's awesome. Thus being set up, they seemed to have a desire of quitting the service and settling in the world. The adventure of their love and marriage had gained them so much favor that they easily discharged from the service, and they immediately set up an eating house, or an ordinary, which was the sign of 3 horseshoes near the castle of Breda, where they soon ran into a good trade and a great many officers eating with them constantly. Okay, so they opened up like a diner, basically, an eating house or an ordinary. It's like an ordinary little place where you could sit down and eat. On their sign, they had 3 horseshoes, and they did plenty of business because all the officers came there to eat. Well, that's cool. But this happiness did not last long, for the husband soon died. Man, she cannot catch a fucking break. Fuck. All right, so this happiness lasted not long, for the husband soon died, and the peace of Reswick being concluded, there was no resort of officers to Breda, as usual, so that the widow, having little or no trade, was forced to give up housekeeping, and her substance being by degrees quite spent, she again hands apparel, and going into Holland there on a regiment of foot, quartered in one of the frontier towns. Holy shit. So her fucking husband died, right? Back off. There's no more soldiers coming to eat at her restaurant, so that shit goes broke. She goes broke. Now she put fucking men's clothes back on and rejoined another regiment of foot. Here she did not remain long. There was no likelihood of preferment in time of peace. Therefore, she took a resolution of seeking her fortune another way, and withdrawing from the regiment, she shipped herself on board of a vessel bound for the West Indies to go pirating. I love this fucking shit. Wow. Fucking hardcore, man. Fucking hardcore. That really sucks. I mean, that shit really, really, really sucks. Let me flip over to the chat real quick. Let me see what everybody's saying. Yeah, tough life, man. No shit, right? Let me flip up through here. I haven't been paying attention I've been reading to everyone. Let me see while we've been popping in. All right, let's see. PD Paisano, what's going on? Foolish Flock, I think I said out here earlier. Hi again. What's up, KD? Good to see you, bro. Hope you're well. B1, David James. What's up, Aegon? Good to see you, man. Thanks for coming through. What's up, Mickey Griggs? Good to see you too, man. Hope you're having a good night. Yeah, B1, isn't that a great line? B1 says Mars and Venus cannot be served at the same time. That's good storytelling right there. Mars being the god of war, Venus being love. Isn't that great writing? Yeah, great fucking eye for literature, B1. Mickey Griggs has been a bad night here. Well, hey, man, we hope it gets better for you, bro. We hope the night gets better for you. We hope you feel better soon, man. No doubt about it. Yeah, KD says, good for her for real. That's why he wanted to marry her. I agree, right? So she was modest, right? And reserved. She was like, I like you. I wanted you to find out that I was a woman. I've been in love with you for a long time. Doesn't mean I'm just going to hop in the fucking tent, right? Doesn't mean I'm just going to hop into the act with you, right? I'm a good woman. And if you want a good woman, you're going to have to treat me like a good woman. You're going to have to court me like a good woman. And he respected that, and he did. He was like, okay, so she's not just some mistress. She's not some fucking side piece, right? I'll marry this woman. If she's a good woman like that, I'll marry her. I agree with you, man. But yeah, that shit sucks, man. He dies, right? They finally get married. She goes public as a woman for the first time, putting on women's clothes and all that kind of stuff. They open a restaurant. It's doing really, really well. What's up, Mandy? Good to see you. But yeah, they get married. They open a business. They open this restaurant. All their like fellow soldiers and other people that have heard about this story are coming there and eating. They're successful. They've got a happy life. And then this fucking guy dies. Then war kicks off. All the soldiers are gone. Her restaurant goes under. Then she's broke. So she put fucking pants back on, becomes a dude again, goes to war, right? She could have done all manner of shit, but that's what she knows, right? She's been a soldier for so long. So she goes back to fucking war. That shit ends. And she's like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm jumping on a boat, right? I'm getting on a ship. I'm going down to the Caribbean and I'm going pirating. Fuck the bullshit, right? I tried this whole like good life shit. The world shit on me. Now I can't even be a soldier. If I'm going to fight and be a soldier, I might as well do it and get some money, right? So I love this woman, man. She's fantastic. All right, let me just sip my drink and hit this bowl real quick and we will continue on. Excuse me. All right, so let's do that again. So therefore, she took a resolution of seeking her fortune another way, and withdrawing from the shipped herself on board of a vessel bound for the West Indies to go a-pirating. It happened this ship was taken by English pirates, and Mary Read was the only English person on board. They kept her amongst them, and having plundered the ship, let it go again. After following this trade for some time, the king's proclamation came out and was published in all parts of the West Indies for pardoning such pirates, who should voluntarily surrender themselves by a certain day therein mentioned. The crew of Mary Read took the benefit of this proclamation, and having surrendered, lived quietly on shore. But money beginning to grow short, and hearing that Captain Woods Rogers, governor of the island of Providence, was fitting out for some privateers to cruise against the Spaniards, she with several others embarked for that island in order to go upon the privateering account, being resolved to make her fortune one way or another. Dude, she is awesome. So she's left Europe on a ship to go to the West Indies to go a-pirating. That fucking ship got taken by English pirates. Now, we've talked about several times through this fucking, I don't know what you want to call it, through all these different episodes, this series, right? We've spoken several times about how when these pirates took a ship, when they were on board, they would give everybody on that ship a choice, right? If there was no quarter given, they would just kill everybody unless somebody asked to join. But if they had everybody just surrender when they got on the boat and started taking things, they gave every sailor on that ship a choice. You can either join us and become a pirate, right? Become a member of the Brethren of the Coast, serve by our rules, or you can stay here and keep being a fucking bitch ass if you want to. That's up to you. So the ship that she took from Europe to go to the West Indies so that she could be a pirate was actually taken by fucking English pirates on the way there, and she joined them, right? They let the ship go. She stays with them. After following this trade for some time, right? So after they went out and they just went fucking pirating. That's basically what that sentence means. After following this trade is piracy. So she stayed with them and they pirated together for some time. Then the king's proclamation was published all over the place, so everyone heard about it, right? Offering a pardon to pirates, to anybody that would voluntarily surrender themselves, not pirate anymore, they would give you a pardon. So her crew, the crew that she joined, took the benefit of that proclamation and surrendered and decided to go live quietly on the shore of Nassau. But their money started to grow short, and they heard that Captain Woodes Rogers, who was governor of the island, was fitting out some ships for privateers, right? He was issuing privateering licenses to go out and cruise against the Spaniards. So she and several other people, right, embarked for that island in order to get the job of privateering against the Spanish, because she said she was resolved to make her fortune one way or the other. Good for her. These privateers were no sooner sailed out, but the crews of some of them who had been pardoned rose against their commanders and turned themselves to their old trade. That's fucking hilarious. Well, what do you expect, right? You got the pirates of Nassau. At this point, they fucking hate Woodes Rogers, right? Most of them are wishing they never would have taken the pardon and letting England back into the island. They're, you know, we know that from later history that we'll get into. But Woodes Rogers gave privateering licenses to ex-pirates. Okay. They get out in the ocean on these ships and they just turned pirate again. And they rose against their commanders and turned themselves to their old trade. This number was Mary Read. Not surprising, right? She wanted to be a pirate in the first place. She just ended up with a crew that predominantly wanted to take this pardon, right? Now she's in Nassau. She gets on this ship to go privateering because she needs to get some money or the other. And all the people started talking about pirating again, and she was down. So in this number was Mary Read. It is true, she often declared that the life of a pirate was what she always abhorred, but went into it only upon compulsion, both this time and before, intending to quit it whenever a fair opportunity should offer itself. Yet it doesn't sound like it, I gotta be honest. And that's what it says next. Yet some of the evidence against her upon her trial, who were forced men and had sailed with her, deposed on oath that in times of action, no person amongst all of the pirates they witnessed were more resolute or ready to board or undertake anything that was hazardous as she and Anne Bonny, that both of them were fierce with the sword and most men feared them. Particularly at the time when they were attacked and taken, when they came to close quarters, none kept the deck to fight except Mary Read and Anne Bonny. And one more upon which she, Mary Read, called to those under deck to come up and fight like men, and finding that they did not stir, fired her guns down into the hold amongst them, killing one and wounding others. Bro, she's hardcore. I believe every word of that. I mean, obviously, when she went to trial, she told them the first part, right? She was like, listen, I fucking abhor pirating. It's terrible. I only went into it upon compulsion. I needed money. The ship I was on got taken, right? She goes, I was intending to quit it whenever a fair opportunity should offer itself. That's what you tell your lawyer to say to court, right? So that's all that play, right? That's what you're supposed to say. It's like, I didn't do it, right? I didn't do it. I didn't mean to. I didn't know you couldn't do that. But the dudes that knew her that flipped, right? The guys that fucking flipped at trial, they said that her and Anne Bonny were two of the baddest bitches that Pirate Kingdom ever saw. They said that they were badass with a sword. And we know Mary Read would have been a gnarly fighter, right? All she's done has been in the service and been in like foot regiments and horse regiments. won awards and shit like that for her bravery, right? Specifically for her bravery. So everything they're saying makes sense, that she was braver than all these dudes, that she was down for the get down, that she was ready to fucking go. And it said even when the other men went and hid down underneath the deck, right? They went into the hold to hide because the fighting was getting so fierce. It said that the only people that would be left up there would be Anne Bonny and Mary Read. And it said that Mary Read started talking shit to the guys one time that had run down and hid like bastards, right? Like little bitches. And she told them, come up and fight like men. And I'm sure she called them every name in the book, let's be real. But finding that they did not stir, she fired her guns down into the hold amongst them, killing one and wounding others. That shit's fucking nuts. I believe every word of that. She sounds hardcore, man. She sounds really hardcore. Let me flip to the chat real quick. Yeah, all those governors were super corrupt. Yeah, KD, fucking Woodes Rogers was a real piece of crap. He was a piece of shit. Yeah, he was a real piece of shit. Who the fuck is Woodes Rogers? I mean, that's we will eventually get to that. But the quick rundown is that he came from a rich family in England. He wanted to go out, like, first he just wanted to go out and kind of like adventure and get into some privateering and stuff like that. Everyone fucking hated him. William Dampier sailed with him, and we're going to go through William Dampier's books, right? Or his stories, because he's our pirate scientist, and he was there at Panama when it got taken. He was very, very close friends with Alexander Esquemeling, the guy that's the first book that we read, was his firsthand account. William Dampier was friends with him, and he ended up on a ship with Woodes Rogers down near South America. And he talks about how everyone fucking hated Woodes Rogers, wanted to put him off the boat on shore, and how they like took him off the main ship even and stuck him on a small ship and like started giving him smaller lots of food and water because they hated him. But yeah, he ended up doing privateering, had a couple of S's, went back to England, wrote a book, made like a little bit of press. And then with private contracts, he put together enough money to go to the crown and say, if you'll let me be governor of the Bahamas, I'll take X amount of ships and X amount of soldiers, and you give me a pardon, right? A blank pardon for everybody. He goes, I will get everything to shape. He goes, I know a lot of these pirates. And they told him, they were like, you don't have any problem turning on these guys that were your friends? And he was just like, they're not my friends. Fuck those guys. Just because I worked with them doesn't mean I like them. He's like, I want to be governor, right? What he wanted to be was a king. He wanted to be absolute in his power. And he had no morals whatsoever. He had no values whatsoever. He was a fucking snitch. He would turn on you in a heartbeat. He murdered people in the cruelest fashions, just like he was very sadistic. But anyway, we will eventually get to him. But yeah, so anyway, I believe all of that shit. Now, it says that she denied all of the evidence against her. Well, good girl, you're supposed to, right? It says this was part of the evidence read about how she was badass with a sword and people feared her and she was always like down for the get down. All that was part of the evidence against her at trial, which she denied. Which, whether true or not, this much is certain, that she did not want for bravery, right? So, okay, so this much is certain that she was very, very brave. Nor indeed was she less remarkable for her modesty, according to her notions of virtue. Her gender was not so much as suspected by any single person on board, well, except for Jack Rackham, until Anne Bonny. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's correct. No, right. Jack Rackham knew about Anne Bonny. No, that's right. I'm sorry. My bad. Okay, so nobody else on the ship knew that she was a woman, but Anne Bonny knew almost immediately. Okay, so let's read that part again. This much is certain, that she was very brave, nor indeed was she less remarkable for her modesty, according to her notions of virtue. Her gender was not so much as suspected by any person on board until Anne Bonny, who was not altogether so reserved in point of chastity. Well, that's true, right? We'll get to that, but we know that Anne Bonny was she was like Pirate's Life for me. She was wild as fuck, and she shared Jack Rackham with Mary Read at one point. We'll see what we get into here, and like they might not describe it as such, but they basically had a throuple. Yeah. All right. So Anne Bonny found out that she was a woman. It says Anne Bonny, who was not altogether so reserved in her point of chastity, took a particular liking to her. In short, Anne Bonny took her for a handsome young fellow at first, and for some reasons best known to herself, first discovered her gender to Mary Read. Mary Read, knowing what she would be at and being very sensible of her own incapacity that way, was forced to come to a right understanding with her. And so, to the great disappointment of Anne Bonny, she let her know that she was a woman also. This was a stratagem. So she got her to tell her, right? She knew that she suspected that it was a woman, is what it sounds like, if we're going to be honest, right? So Anne Bonny suspects that so she starts coming on to Mary Read as if it was a man, right? It says she was coming on to her as if it was a handsome young fellow, and then put Mary Read in such a position, right? Obviously, to be like, hey, yo, I don't have a penis. That's basically what that says in really kind, really like dance around the topic, old English language. They have such fucking long ways of saying that's why I pause. I've mentioned that in other episodes too. Like I pause sometimes and think of a better way to put some of these things in these old books, because they just go on, man. They have like really long, boring descriptions of stuff that can be said very easily. Yeah, so Mary Read, knowing what she was at, right? Knowing that Anne Bonny was hitting on her as a man, and being very sensible of her own incapacity that way, which means she knows she doesn't have a penis, was forced to come to a right understanding, was forced to tell her the truth. And so, to the great disappointment of Anne Bonny, she was right. This was a woman. But this intimacy so disturbed Captain Rackham, who was the lover and gallant of Anne Bonny, that he grew furiously jealous, so that he told Anne Bonny he would cut her new lover's throat, therefore to quiet him if he saw them together again. So she had to let Rackham in on their little secret. Okay. Right. So we know, we've talked about before, Anne Bonny, and we're going to get into her story, right? So we'll get into all of that. But she ended up with Jack Rackham. She and Jack Rackham were basically like pirate married. I mentioned that before, right? They were, Anne Bonny was wild as fuck. She was a pirate. She was not a lady, right? Mary Read is a lady. She dresses like a dude, right? But even here on the pirate ships, they're saying she was still very modest, was still very virtuous, never even led on to anybody else that she was a woman, right? Whereas that's Mary Read. Whereas Anne Bonny is a wild fucking pirate. She sleeps with all kinds of people. They had an open relationship, she and Rackham. But Rackham was suspecting that they were like developing a romance, and that's different. So Rackham was like, listen, Anne, right? I know you do what you do from time to time. I know we have our fun, but you guys are getting way too close. And if I see you together, I'm going to cut that motherfucker's throat to shut him up. So Anne Bonny had to be like, yo, you need to chill the fuck out. That's actually a chick in dude's clothes. Fucking relax, right? All right, let's get back to it. Captain Rackham, as he was enjoined with Anne Bonny, the thing a secret from all of the ship's company, notwithstanding all her cunning and reserve, love found her out in this disguise and hindered her from forgetting her gender. In their cruise, they took a number of ships belonging to Jamaica and other parts of the West Indies, bound to and from England. And whenever they met any good artist or other person that they thought might be of great use to their company, if he was not willing to enter, it was their custom to keep him by force. Among these was a young fellow of a most engaging behavior, or at least he was so in the eyes of Mary Read, who became so she could neither rest night or day. But as there is nothing more ingenious than love, it was no hard matter for her who had before been practiced to find a way to let him discover her gender. Okay, so it's a fucking long way to put that. She's been through this before, right? We know she fell in love and got married. When she was in the service, she basically let it happen like on purpose, right? That the guy would discover her. When we read it the first time, it said that she decided to let him know what her gender was, but without it being obvious, right? That she wanted it to seem like they found out on their own. So that's what she's doing again. She first insinuated herself into his liking by talking against the life of a pirate, which he was altogether adverse to, having been forced to join their party against his will. So they became messmates and strict companions. When she found he had a friendship for her as a man, she suffered the discovery to be made by carelessly showing her breasts. The young fellow, who was made of flesh and blood, and his curiosity and desire so raised by this sight that he never ceased importuning her till she confessed that she was indeed a woman. Now begins the scene of love again. As he had a liking and esteem for her under her supposed character, it was now turned into fondness and desire. Her passion was no less violent than his, and perhaps she expressed it by one of the most generous actions near one of the islands they had appointed to go to shore and fight, according to the custom of the pirates. Mary Read was to the last degree uneasy and anxious for the fate of her new lover. She would not have had him refuse the challenge, because she could not bear the thoughts of his being branded as a coward and punished as such. On the other side, she dreaded the event. What was it? And apprehended the fellow might be too hard. Okay. She was scared he was going to get fucked up. That's the short version, right? Let's be real. So she did this with her first husband. We saw that, right? She fell in love with that dude. But before she told him that she was a woman, she was just like going out with him every time he got called into action or had to go on a patrol or whatever. She was just going. And it said at first everybody thought she was insane, and it even said that dude was like, yo, what the fuck, following me around, right? And then she let him know that she was a woman. In this case, this is like a fucking artist that they took off of a ship against his will. She fell in love with, eventually showed that she was a woman, but now they're all going to go on shore to do some pirating. And this motherfucker is expected to handle his own. And she's like, dude, there's no way this guy can handle his own, right? That's what she's saying. She's scared for him. She goes, and it says on one hand, she knows she can't keep him from going because he'll get branded as a coward and punished as such, right? She goes, but on the other hand, this dude's about to get fucked up. She feared for his life more than she did her own. It says, generosity, it stirs the heart up to the most noble actions. In this dilemma, she showed that she feared more for his life than she did her own. For she took a resolution of quarreling with a man that called him out and accused him of being a coward on the beach. Here we go. Dude was acting like a bitch. One of the other pirates called him out and fucking challenged him to a fight. And now Mary Read is stepping in on his defense. That's not good. That's going to make him more of a coward, you would think, right? But it says she took a resolution of quarreling with this fellow herself. And having challenged him ashore, she appointed the time 2 hours sooner that when she was to meet her lover, where she fought him at sword and pistol and killed him upon the spot. Dude, she dueled this fucking guy. She fought him with sword and pistol and fucking killed the guy. It is true that she had fought before when she had been insulted by some of those fellows, but now it was all together in her lovers. She stood as if it were between him and death. Live without him. If she had no regard for her before, or if he had no regard for her before, this action would have bound him to her forever. But there was no occasion for ties or obligations. His inclination towards her was sufficient. In fine, they applied they made promises to each other, which Mary Read said she looked upon to be as a good marriage as any in a pirate life. That's pretty cool. Right? It's like we're on a bunch of pirates. There's no church nearby. This is the fucking 1700s, right? She's like, if we're promising each other to be together forever, we're married, right? That's as good as married, right? She's like, everybody here, if you're religious, leave gods everywhere, right? So if you're making promises to somebody on a beach, you don't necessarily need somebody paper. So I like that. That's pretty cool. But that's fucking crazy, dude. They go on shore to go fighting. This artist guy's acting like a bitch. One of the pirates calls him out and challenges him to a fight. She steps in and goes, yo, fuck that. I challenge you. And we can do that shit in 2 hours, right? When we get done pirating here, I'll meet you over there. And she goes over there and duels him with fucking swords and pistols and kills his ass to keep him alive. And then he's like, oh, yeah, I got to marry this chick, bro. This chick's fucking hot and she's badass, right? And she's keeping his ass alive, so they get married. She looked upon this to be as a good a marriage as any in a pirate life, and in conscience as if it had been done by a minister in a church. And to this was owing her a great belly, which she pleaded to save her life. Okay, here we go. So she got pregnant. Okay. She declared that she had never committed adultery or fornication with any man that she was not married to. She commended the justice of the court before which she was tried for distinguishing the nature of their crimes. Her husband, as she called him, with several others being acquitted, and being asked who he was, she would not tell, but said he was an honest man and had no inclination to such practices, and that they had both resolved to leave the pirates the first opportunity they had to apply themselves to some of honest livelihood. Okay, so they get fucking caught by the cops. This story flips us to when they're at trial. She is pregnant. When they all get arrested, remember that artist dude was there by force. He was not a pirate. He was there by force. Now, this is kind of bullshit because in some of the past stories we've read, including Jack Rackham's story last week, right? You guys that were here last week that heard Jack Rackham's story, some guys from the beach had literally just got on Jack Rackham's boat. They had never even left the spot, but they got on Jack Rackham's boat to have punch. And then that ship got busted by the cops. Those dudes had never done a fucking job with Jack Rackham. But because they were on his boat, the cops found them guilty of piracy and hung every fucking one of them. Right? In this case, this pirate ship gets nabbed by the cops, the one that has Anne Bonny and Mary Read on it, right? Jack Rackham. It's all the same guys as last week. Remember that, right? We already know how Jack Rackham's boat got taken. I just went through it again. They invited some people on their boat. The cops literally fucking showed up, right? The soldiers literally showed up. They came around the other side of the island up the beach. Boom, they were popped. Okay, same story. So now we fast forward to them being in court. A bunch of guys got acquitted because they were there by force. That seems, I mean, I agree with that, but they should have fucking gone along with that. That should be a rule because that didn't happen to the other guys that had just got on the boat. That's super fucked up. Right? That's a wild fucking trial. That's a weird court case, right? You're going to hang the guys that just fucking got there and had nothing to do with nothing, but you're going to let go 8 guys that have been on the ship for fucking months, probably. One of them to one of the pirates and got her fucking pregnant, right? Now, of the 8 that were acquitted, when she's telling the court, right, she tells the court, I've never had sex with a man that I was not married to. She tells the court, she says, I've never committed adultery or fornication. I was married. My fucking husband died. I didn't sleep with nobody. I didn't sleep with nobody till I met this fucking dude, and we got married. Then I slept with the guy, right? And I got pregnant. But she says, I've never fornicated with any man outside of marriage before. And they said, okay, well, who's your husband? And she said, he's one of the acquitted guys. And they said, which one? And she goes, I'm not fucking telling you because you'll probably fucking kill him, right? And she's probably right. She's probably right, right? She says, I'm not fucking telling you. She goes, just know that he is an honest man. That's exactly what it says here. She said he was an honest man and had no inclination to be with the pirates in the first place, and that they had both resolved together, now that she was pregnant, to leave the pirates the first opportunity and apply themselves to some honest livelihood. That part's probably not true. She was probably going to have a fucking pirate baby, but whatever. That's what the court transcripts say. It is no doubt, but many have passion for her. Yet the court could not avoid finding her guilty. For among other things, one of the evidences against her deposed that being taken by Rackham and detained some time on board, he fell accidentally into discourse with Mary Read, whom he was taking for a young man at the time, and asked her what pleasure she could have in being concerned in such enterprises where her life was continually in danger by fire or for sword. And not only so, but she must be sure of dying an ignominious death if she would be taken alive by the soldiers. She answered that as to hanging, she thought it was no great hardship, for were it not for that, every coward. Wow. This is pretty fucking badass. She answered that as far as hanging goes, she thought it was no great hardship, because if it wasn't for that penalty, every cowardly fellow in the world would turn pirate, and so infest the seas that men of courage starve. Fuck, that's badass. That if it was to put to the choice of the pirates, they would not have had punishment less than death, the fear of which kept some dastardly rogues honest amongst each other, and that many of those who are now cheating the widows and orphans and oppressing their poor neighbors would have no money to obtain justice when they rob at sea, and the ocean would be crowded with rogues like the land. No merchant would venture out into them, so that the trade in a little time would not be worth following. Being found, however, quick with child, which means very pregnant, at this time, being found quick with child, as has been observed, execution was respited, and it is possible she would have found favor, but she was seized with a violent fever soon after this trial, and she died in prison. That's the life of Mary Read, ladies and gentlemen. Fucking crazy. That's a wild ride. A sad tale of a badass woman. Hard-hearted, created by the pressure that she had in her own world. Born a girl, had to live as a boy. Put to fucking labor at 13 as a servant to a woman by her mother that didn't want to work. Ran off, joined a man of war at 13 as a boy. Dude, that would have been a really fucking hard life. Grew up into a soldier in a foot regiment, hand-to-hand combat, on the ground, pitched battles, right? In 1700s. A horse regiment, got all kinds of awards for bravery and for being badass. Fell in love with a guy. Finally came clean. Public as a woman, finally as a grown-up, right? Gets married, has a happy life, has a business that's doing well. Then her fucking husband dies. Restaurant goes shit. She goes broke. She joins the military, goes back to war as a man. That shit ends. She decides to get on a boat and go to the fucking Caribbean to be a pirate. Gets taken by a pirate ship on the way there. Joins the pirates, right? So she didn't even get to the Caribbean, or maybe she did but they got taken. She never set foot on land. Right off of that boat for a while. Those fuckers took a pardon. She gets stuck living on a beach like, this fucking sucks, man. I need to be pirating or doing something. Woodes Rogers offers up jobs as a privateer. She joins with all her pirate friends. They take over the ships, right? And go pirating. She eventually joins Rackham's ship, where Anne Bonny figures out that she's a woman. Rackham wants to fucking kill him because he thinks that Mary Reed's a handsome young fellow hitting on Anne Bonny, who he's in love with. But then he finds out, okay, everything's cool. They steal some artist off of a boat. Mary Reed falls in love with the artist, does the same thing she did with the first husband, and like just lets him, accidentally see her while she's changing, it sounds like. Right? Because we know she was a woman of virtue and respected herself, right? So she probably just arranged and made it so he caught her changing, knew she was a woman, became interested, but then she defended his life and fucking killed a guy in a duel with swords and fucking pistols, right? On a beach. I don't know how much more pirate you guys want than that. I mean, this was a badass pirate, dude. She went on shore with her pirate crew to go. Somebody tried the dude she was in love with, and she goes, hell, fuck that. She said, after we're done robbing and stealing from this town, you meet me over there in 2 hours. I challenge you to a duel. And then on a fucking beach in the Caribbean, she duels this fucking guy with swords and pistols and then clips him. Right? He's like, okay, she's awesome, right? She's fucking hot. She's tough. She sticks up for me, and he's a bitch, so she's do it. He gets married to her on that beach. Gets her pregnant, and then he gets let loose. He literally gets acquitted because he was taken by force against his will, and he was an artist. She refuses to snitch him out and say who he was in court as the father of her child. So she saves his fucking life, period. They tell her, okay, well, you're pregnant. We're not going to kill you, right? We're not going to execute you. You're pregnant. You can just go to jail. We'll get back to you on how long. We'll figure that out. But you go to jail. You're very pregnant. You're making us nervous. Right? Go back to jail. You have the baby. And then she caught some fucked up sickness and a fever and died. That shit just sucks, man. That shit sucks. Sounds like she was tough, though. Sounds like she was really tough. When they were talking about how, when we know she got awards for bravery, she was known for being tough and brave in the military, but you had her fellow pirates talking about how most of the men feared her and Anne Bonny, that she and Anne Bonny were two of the best swordsmen, whatever, right? Sword wielders, right? Some of the, or as my grandmother called them, swashbucklers. She loved old swashbuckling movies. They were some of the best swashbucklers that they had. And a lot of times when other men would run in fear from the fights that they were having, and they would cower in the hold under the deck, they said that Anne Bonny and Mary Reed would still be up there down for the get down, chop, shooting, and killing. And when they would talk shit to the guys that had run and hide in the run and hid in the hold, and that they talked, she'd tell them to come out and fight like men, and when they wouldn't, Mary Reed went over and just started firing her pistols into the hold at the fucking cowards, killed one and wounded a bunch of them. This shit's badass, man. Yeah, that shit is badass. Let me go over here and flip up through the chat here real quick. Going on. Yeah, she had honor for real, KB. Sad ending for such a good woman, Mandy says. I agree. Yeah, for real. R.I.P. Mary Reed, right? Strong gal, MRE says. R.I.P. No doubt about it, man. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right. So the next one we get into will be Anne Bonny. I'm going to grab a smoke real quick. And then we'll pack this thing back up. And we'll just call this a quick intermission in between stories. So Rat Trap can grab a smoke, pack this thing back up, and then we'll get right back to it. So let's see. Let me flip over here. We'll do this. We'll put the song back on for a minute for the intermission while I go grab a smoke, and I will be right back.
The king and his men stole the queen from her bed and bound her in her bones. The seas be ours, and by the powers where we will we roam. Yo-ho, all hands, hoist the colors high. Heave-ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die.
Now some have died and some are alive, and others sail on the sea with their keys to the cage and the devil to pay. We lay to fiddler's grave.
Yo-ho, all hands, hoist the colors high. Heave-ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die. Yo-ho, all together, hoist the colors high. Heave-ho, thieves and beggars, never shall we die. The bell has been raised from its watery grave. Do you hear its sepulchral tone? We call to all, pay heed the squall, and turn yourselves toward home. Yo-ho, all hands, hoist the colors high. Heave-ho, thieves and beggars,
All right, and we are back. Perfect timing, actually. I wonder if she, damn it, Mandy says, I wonder if she was actually going to become honest. She was having a baby. I mean, it's possible, right? It's totally possible. Said he didn't want to be there. We knew he didn't want to be there, so he probably would have been on her about that shit, I'm sure. It says that just to gain his friendship at first, she had to act like she thought pirating was bullshit too, right? It says she was full of shit. She was telling him, oh, this place sucks, man. I get it. No, this whole pirating thing, I know you don't like it, so I don't like it either because I like you. And that's how they became friends at first. So there's an argument to be made there. But at the same time, there's another argument to be made that she was extremely pregnant by the time they were arrested and went on trial. They had obviously known she was pregnant for quite some time and were still on the fucking pirate shit, right? There's a chance he made friends with the pirates and was enjoying the pirate life by this time, so it's hard to say unless you were there. Unfortunately, we didn't know them. We didn't know what their personalities were truly like outside of like the bravery and the fighting and stuff like that. But it's entirely possible, right? That he could have been like, listen, man, you don't need to steal money. I can work. I'm an artist. I will get us by. We can raise our child and in a legal life and have a happy life and everything can be cool. You can have a family, right? You never knew your dad. Your mom sucked. You fucking took off at 13. You've been in the army. You've had a hard fucking life. Now you're a pirate. Holy shit. You're constantly putting yourself in danger. So who knows, right? Maybe they were going to hang out and they were going to have a pirate baby, right? Judging by the fact that she was very pregnant and they were still there. But it's possible they were going to leave soon. Maybe, the stories are right? Maybe she did go along and he convinced her to leave. And maybe she was like, let's just rob a few more ships, right? That old story. Like, let's just get some more money this way first so we have a nice nest egg. So maybe both are true. Maybe they hung out, stayed pirating to get some loot together. And then they were going to stop. Who knows though, right? She married a wimp. He should have asked her for fighting lessons. Mandy says that's funny. She didn't need a tough guy, though, Mandy. Katie says she was the tough guy. That's truth right there. She was the tough guy. She went out there and dueled the other pirate on the fucking shore, right? For his honor. Yeah. No doubt. Yeah, David James says victim of circumstance. It was pretty fucked up the way it all went down. There's no doubt about that. It really sucks, man. Yeah, it really sucked. It all went down the way it shook out. I'll smoke some weed, and then we will continue talking about pirates. Get this thing on fire. There we go. Much better. I think we'll do that one more time. Maybe hit the vape pen. Then we'll get into the life of Anne Bonny, which is also a wild ride, ladies and gentlemen. A wild ride indeed. Woo. Yep. Good stuff. All right. If they had paid attention, Mandy says, after she died, they could have figured out who he was, either the man that cried the hardest. He was probably definitely a crier. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it doesn't say whether or not she had the baby before she died. It sounded like she went from trial to jail, and then she got sick in that fucking gnarly, gross cell, right? And got a fever and died. So I'm thinking maybe the baby died too. That shit sucks, man. That shit really sucks all the way around. William Wallace says, yeah, he sounds like a bedwetter too. That's funny. That's funny. All right, here we go. The life of Anne Bonny. As we have been more particular, excuse me, I'm trying not to cough. Get my breath about me. As we have been more particular in the lives of these two women than those of other pirates, it is incumbent on us as a faithful historian to begin with their birth. Anne Bonny was born at a town near Cork in the Kingdom of Ireland. Her father was an attorney, but Anne was not one of his legitimate children, which seems to cross an old proverb which says that bastards have the best luck. Wow. Her father was a married man, and his wife, having been brought to bed, contracted an illness in her lying in, and in order to recover her health, she was advised to remove for change of air. The place she chose was a few miles distance from her dwelling, where her husband's mother lived. What an old way to say this. Okay. Anne Bonny was one. Okay, her father was an attorney. She was one of his illegitimate children. So when he cheated on his wife with another woman, Anne Bonny was born. Okay. It says, which seems to be against an old proverb that says bastards have the best luck. So they're telling us right now she has shit luck, right? Her father was a married man. His wife got sick. The doctor told her that in order to recover her health, she should basically move somewhere else, get a change of air. Fucking ridiculous 1700s garbage, right? The place that she chose to go was a few miles distance from her house where her husband's mother lived. Here, she hung out for some time, her husband staying at home. The servant maid, whom she left to look after the house and attend the family, being a beautiful young woman, was courted by a young man of the same town who was a tanner. This tanner used to take his opportunities when the family was out of the way of coming to pursue his courtship, and being with the maid one day as she was employed in the household business, not having the fear of God before his eyes, he took his opportunity when her back was turned of whipping 3 silver spoons into his pocket. Oh, what an asshole. What an asshole. All right. So the attorney, which is Anne Bonny's father, he stayed home while his wife moved away to try and get a better, like a change of air because she was sick. The housemaid in his house was being courted by a tanner, somebody that worked with leather. That guy took an opportunity one day when the family was out of the house to come and see the maid, and he stole 3 silver spoons. The maid soon missed the spoons, and knowing that nobody had been in the room but herself and the young man since she saw him last, she charged him with taking them. He very stiffly denied it, upon which she grew outrageous and threatened to go to a constable in order to carry him before a justice of the peace. These menaces frightened him out of his wits, well knowing he could not stand a search. Wherefore he endeavored to pacify her by desiring her to examine the drawers and other places, and perhaps she might find them. And this time he slipped into another room where the maid usually lay, and put the spoons between her own sheets, and then made his escape by a back door, concluding that she must find them when she went to bed. And so next day he might pretend he did it only to frighten her, and the things might be laughed off for a jest. But as soon as she missed him, she gave over her search, concluding he had carried them off, and went directly to a constable in order to have him arrested. The young man was informed that a constable had been in search of him, but he regarded it but little, not doubting but all would be well the next day. Found them. 3 or 4 days passed, and he still was told the constable was upon the hunt for him. This made him lie concealed. He could not comprehend the meaning of it. He imagined no less that the maid had a mind to convert the spoons to her own use and put the robbery upon him. This shit's ridiculous. He steals 3 silver spoons. She finds out. She accuses him. He says, no, you're mistaken. We'll find them. Let me come and help you look. She says, okay. He goes into the house. He puts the fucking, instead of just putting the spoons back, he puts them in between her sheets so that she'll just find them and think that he was fucking with her and they could laugh about it. But she did not find the spoons, gave up searching for them, called the fucking cops, and the cops are looking for this dude. He figures, well, she'll find them, she'll tell the cops, and it'll be fine. But now 3 or 4 days later, the cops are still fucking looking for him. And now he thinks that she found them and decided to steal them herself and still blame him. This dude's a born mook. It happened at this time that the mistress, being perfectly recovered from her late... Okay, so the wife is no longer sick and came home. She was returned home in company with her mother-in-law. The first news she heard was of the loss of the spoons, along with the manner how. The maid telling her at the same time that the young man was run away. The young fellow had intelligence of the wife's arrival and considering with himself that he could never appear again in his business unless the matter was over and done with, and she being a good-natured woman, he took a resolution of going directly to her and of telling her the whole story, only with this difference, that he did it for a jest. The mistress, or the wife, could scarce believe it, however. She went directly to the maid's room and turning down the bedclothes there, to her great surprise, found the 3 spoons. Upon this, she desired the young man to go home and mind his business, for he should have no more trouble about it. The wife could not imagine the meaning of this. She never had found the maid guilty of any pilfering, and therefore it could not enter her head that she designed to steal the spoons for herself. Upon the whole, she concluded the maid had not been in her bed from the time the spoons were missed. She grew immediately jealous upon it and suspected that the maid must have been sleeping with her husband while she was gone, and this was the reason why the spoons were not found sooner. This shit is nuts. This is all wild accusations and paranoia from this is fucking nuts. This maid was minding her own business. Some fucking weirdo that had a crush on her used it against her to come in the house and steal. He's a mook, gives them back but hides them in her bed. For whatever reason, the maid doesn't find them in her bed. Okay. The wife comes home. The dude that stole them and hid them in the bed says, you know what? The cops are looking for me. I can't even go to work. I'm just going to have... The wife's a good lady. She'll understand that I'm a fucking idiot. I'll just go tell her I was playing games with the maid. I'll tell her where I put the spoons. She can find them and this will all be over with. So the wife goes and looks in there, finds the spoons in the maid's bed, and then starts thinking about it and goes, how did this bitch not know she had 3 silver spoons in her bed for a week? Right? If she was sleeping in her bed, how did she not feel them or find them? She goes, you know what? This bitch must be sleeping with my fucking husband. Holy shit. This maid now has been fucking screwed over big time. And now the wife thinks that she's sleeping with her husband. All right. The wife called to mind several actions of kindness her husband had showed the maid in the past. Things that passed by unheeded when they happened, but now that she had got more of a thought about her, jealousy formed in her head, and they all amounted to proofs of their intimacy now. Another circumstance which strengthened the whole was that though her husband knew she was to come home that day and had had no communication with her in 4 months, which was before her last lying in, yet he took an opportunity of going out of town that morning upon some slight pretense. All these things put together in her mind confirmed her jealousy. So now she's like, okay. She's remembering all these times that her husband was nice to the maid. And at the time, she didn't think anything of it. But now she's thinking that it was because they were banging. Right? She thinks that all those things that she remembers are now proof to her that they were doing things together. And she says, what made her think so even more was that her husband hadn't seen her in 4 months or spoken to her, knew she was coming home that day, but still chose that day to leave and go out of town. So she goes, okay, well, my husband must not want to see me because he's in love with the maid. That's just weird. As well, as women seldom forgive injuries of this kind, she thought of discharging her revenge upon the maid, this poor maid. In order to do this, she left the spoons where she found them, in the fucking sheets of the maid's bed, telling her she intended to lie there herself that night because her mother-in-law was to sleep in her bed, and that she, the maid, must find another part of the house to sleep in. The maid, in making the bed, was surprised with the sight of the spoons, but there were very good reasons why it was not proper for her to tell where she found them. Therefore, she took them up, put them in her trunk, intending to leave them in some place where they might be found by chance. That's stupid. She finds the spoons, and she put them in her own personal trunk now. The wife, that everything might look to be done upon design, slept that night in the maid's bed, little dreaming of what an adventure it would produce. After she had been in bed some time, thinking on what had passed, for jealousy kept her awake, she heard somebody enter the room. At first, she thought it to be thieves and was very frightened. She had not the courage enough to call out, but when she heard these words, "Mary, are you awake?" she knew it to be her husband's voice. Then her fright was over, yet she made no answer, lest she find her out. If she spoke, therefore, she resolved to counterfeit sleep and take what followed. Oh my God, dude. This is weird. The wife is sleeping in the maid's bed. In the middle of the night, her husband opens the door and asks and speaks to the wife as if it's the maid, and asks if she's asleep or if she's or not. The wife decided to see what happened and just laid there without saying anything. Dude, when she made no answer, she decided to just give away with the thought of going to sleep and just see what happened next. The husband then came into the bed and that night played the vigorous lover. That is gross and weird. So how did he not know it was his wife, though? Right? Like, I get it if you didn't know at first, and it's okay, fine. The candles are blown out. It's dark. But still, dude, you're going to get in bed and you're not going to know it's a different woman. Like, their shape isn't going to be different, right? Like, that's weird, dude. But it says the husband came to bed and that night slept with her. But one thing spoiled the diversion on the wife's side, which was the reflection that it was not designed for her. However, she was very passive and bore it like a Christian. What? However, that's that old school shit, like keeping women subservient and stuff. That's really weird, dude. However, she was very passive and bore it like a Christian. So she just was passive and let him fuck her, thinking she was the maid, and didn't say anything like it and bore it as a Christian. Wow, that's a weird thing to say, I think. Early before day, she stole out of bed, leaving him asleep, and went to her mother-in-law, telling her what had happened, not forgetting how he had used her as taking her for the maid. The husband also stole out, not thinking it convenient to be caught in that room. In the meantime, the revenge of the mistress was strong against the maid, and without considering that to her she owed the diversion of the night before, and that one good turn should deserve another, she called the cops and charged the maid with stealing the spoons. The maid's trunk was broke open and the spoons found, upon which she was carried before a justice of the peace and by him committed to jail. Fuck. The husband loitered about until 12 o'clock at noon, came home and pretended he was just come to town. This motherfucker right here. So he was sleeping with the maid the whole time. Let's just start with that shit. comes into the room. It's his wife sleeping in the maid's room. She's like, I'm going to bust this motherfucker. But when he comes in, she just decides to let him do her, pretending to be the maid. And then when he's asleep, she gets up, goes, tells the mother-in-law. Dude wakes up and bails the fuck out of the maid's room so he doesn't get caught there. This whole time, he's supposed to be out of town. The next day, the wife has the fucking maid arrested for being a thief. And now the dude's coming home, pretending like he just coming home from out of town. Scantless. All right, stop at the top of that one again. The husband loitered about till 12 o'clock at noon, then came home pretending he was just come to town. As soon as he heard what had passed and related to the maid, he fell into a great passion with his wife. This set the thing into a greater flame. The mother takes the wife's part against her own son. Well, obviously, in so much that the quarrel increased. Okay, so he found out what happened to the maid. He freaked the fuck out on his wife, right? It turned into a huge argument. His own mother sided with the wife, obviously. And then the fight got even bigger. The mother and wife took off. It says they took horse immediately. So they got on their horses and rode the fuck off and went back to the mother's house. And the husband and wife never bedded together after. Okay, I think that's pretty reasonable. She said, fuck that dude, and she never fucking slept with him again. All right, let me check out the chat real quick. What's up, Zio? Good to see you, bro. Hope you're well. Hope you're having a good night. I caught the show earlier. Good stuff. KD said Christians don't get down like that. Yeah, that's weird, right? Wasn't that a weird thing to say? Very strange. David James agrees. Right, that's super weird, man. Super fucking weird. Let's see. What's going on here? Hold on. Hang on, just give me a second. Let me go through here. I just saw a couple of things I wanted to read in the comments before we jump back into that. Oh, Mickey, man, we hope everything's cool, bro. We hope you feel better and everything's all right, man. It's good to know you too, pal. Just do the best you can with what you got, my friend. Yeah, Mandy, at this point in the story, the maid is still in jail. Okay, so we're in the same afternoon there. Okay, remember the morning before the husband woke up, the wife jumped up, ran, told the mother-in-law. Then dude woke up, jumped up, ran to the maid's room because he didn't want to get caught there. And he's supposed to be out of town. Think about the fucking... That's insane. This dude, right? His wife came home after 4 months. She was sick. And she finally came home 4 months later. And he leaves that morning, says he's going out of town. But while... Dude, listen, think about this. His wife and his mom are asleep in his house. He's supposed to be out of town. He comes, breaks into his own house in the middle of the night while his mom and wife are sleeping, and in another room sleeps with who he thinks is the maid. That's some shit right there. That's scantless. That's some shit right there. But the weirdest part of all of that is it being his wife and her just not saying anything and him not noticing it's her. Like, that's all weird, right? So then, yeah, the wife calls the cops. Cops come, arrest the fucking maid for stealing the spoons. Then he comes home around noon pretending he was out of town. He just got back, finds out what happened to the maid, freaks the fuck out on the wife. His mom comes in, sides with his wife. They're all fighting. His mom and wife leave the house and take off. So at this point, she's still in jail. Yeah, what a scandal for the time, right? Where's the young man that originally stole the silver? He's back at his job or whatever. He's back at home. All right, here we go. The maid lay a long time in the prison, it being nearly a year. But before it happened, it was discovered she was with child when she was arraigned at the bar. She was discharged for want of evidence, right? So they just let her go. But while she was in jail for 6 fucking months almost. And she was pregnant. When she finally had a trial, they found they didn't have enough evidence to convict her. The wife's conscience touched her, and as she did not believe the maid guilty of any theft except that of love, she decided not to appear to testify against her, and soon after her acquittal, she was delivered. She gave birth to a girl. Wow. So she was found not guilty. They didn't have enough evidence, and the wife decided not to testify against her because she never stole anything. So good for her for that. And it says soon after the acquittal, the maid gave birth to a little girl. But oh my God, you guys. But what alarmed the husband most was that his wife was with child also. So he got her pregnant that night. He took it for granted that he had had no intimacy with her since her last lying in, grew jealous of her in his turn, and made this a handle to justify himself. Think about this. That's what the long version of this means. His wife never told him that that's who he was sleeping with. He does not know that he slept with his wife that night. He thinks he slept with the maid. So now that his wife is pregnant too, he's like, oh, that means that you had sex with somebody else too, right? And now he feels all justified in the fact that he cheated on her with the maid. This is nuts. This is fucking nuts. His wife gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Then the mother fell ill, sent to her son, right? So remember in the beginning, his mother was there, and she took off with the wife. Now his mom is sick, and sent a note to her because she wanted him to reconcile with his wife. She just gave birth to twins, but he doesn't think those twins are his. He thinks they belong to somebody else. So he wouldn't go along with it. That is insane, right? He thinks his wife had children by somebody else, so he refuses to reconcile with his wife, even on his mother's dying wish. Okay? Therefore, the mother wrote a will, leaving all she had in the hands of certain trustees for the use of the wife and 2 children lately born, and then died a few days later. So she left everything to the wife and fucked him out of everything and just said, fuck you to her son. That's wild. This was an ugly turn upon him, his greatest dependence being upon his mother. So she was paying for all of it. He was an attorney, but I guess she was still paying for all his stuff. However, his wife was kinder to him than he deserved, for she made him a yearly allowance out of what's left to her, though they continued to live separate. All right. His wife seems to be a good person, man. She realized that it wasn't the maid's fault. She didn't testify against her, let her get acquitted. She gave birth to these twins. She never told her husband that they're actually his. That's crazy. So he thinks she cheated on him. But his mom left her all the money, and she still said, all right, you know what? It was your mom. It was, your mom's money. I'm going to give you a yearly allowance to help you out, even though we're not going to live together. It lasted near 5 years at this time, having a great affection for the girl that he had had by his maid. He had a mind to take the girl home to live with him. But as all the town knew it to be a girl, the better to disguise the matter from them as well as from his wife, Here we go. He dressed the young girl as a boy, pretending that it was a relation's child that he was to breed up to be his clerk. Dude, what is with the fucking scandal and this bullshit? Like, this honesty is weird, right? So his wife lives somewhere else raising his children that he doesn't know is his. Okay, he does know that this child he had with the maid is his. He knows that, and he loves this child, and it's a baby girl. But everybody in the town knows that that's the maid's daughter, which means it's his illegitimate child, and everybody's going to be talking scandal and shit about him. So instead of having shit talked about him, he wants his cake and he wants to eat it too, right? He wants to love his baby girl. He wants to raise his baby in his house, but he doesn't want anybody to know that it's the maid's daughter. So he puts this baby girl, or he puts this girl into boy's clothes, pretends that it's a boy, and tells everybody that it's just a child of one of his far-flung relations that he's going to fucking raise to be his clerk. What a weirdo. This is fucking crazy. The wife heard that he had a little boy at home he was very fond of, but as she did not know any relation of his that had such a child, she employed a friend to inquire further into it. This person, by talking with the child, found it to be a girl, discovered that the servant maid was its mother, and that the husband still kept up his correspondence with her. Okay, so he found out. The wife knew that nobody he was related to had a boy or a boy of that age. Had somebody look into it, found out the boy was a girl, and that he was still talking to the maid. Upon this intelligence, the wife, being unwilling that her children's money should go towards the maintenance of bastards, stopped violence. The husband became enraged, and in a kind of revenge, took the maid home and lived with her publicly, so the great scandal of his neighbors would affect his wife. But he soon found the bad effect of it, for by degrees he lost his law practice, so that he saw plainly he could not live there any longer. Therefore he thought of removing and turning what effects he had into ready money, and he went to Cork, and there with his maid and daughter embarked for Carolinas in America. This is crazy. This is fucking crazy. That's nuts, man, that the public reacted like that and like shit on him so hard. But you want to talk about somebody that doesn't make good decisions. What the fuck? Damn it, man. He says this all started over 3 silver spoons. That's a great point. How you just never know what's going to happen, right? Some fucking idiot decided to steal from a girl he had a crush on. She called him on his shit. He put them in a weird place so that she would just find them. She doesn't find them in her bed. The wife comes home, finds them in her bed, says, oh, she must be sleeping with my husband, which she was. Let's all be real right now about it, right? The wife was right. The wife said, dude, these spoons were in between your sheets. It's been a week. I've been gone for 4 months. You obviously weren't sleeping in your fucking bed, right? You must have been sleeping in my husband's bed. My fucking bed is what she's saying, really, the wife. You know what I mean? The wife's like, that means you must have been sleeping in my fucking bed with my fucking husband. So she sleeps in the bed. The husband, who's supposed to be out of town, comes in there, sleeps with her, still doesn't know it, gets her pregnant. His wife gets his real wife pregnant. And then we know what happens from there, right? But all of this started with that shit. That is fucking crazy. How a small action can completely change and alter the course of like several people's lives, right? Those twins are being brought up without a father. This little girl's being raised as a boy and then brought into his home. And then he brings the maid in to fucking cause scandal, and then it ruins him. And now he's moving to America with his daughter and his maid. This is crazy. What's up, James? This is fucking crazy. All right, let me hit this ball real quick. this thing back up real quick here. Hang on. Let's put another little piece of weed in here to set on fire. And then we'll jump back into this. I mean, I think we can all basically see who this little girl is, right? We're reading the life of Anne Bonny. So I think we can all, and they said her father was a lawyer, right? That's this guy. They said she was one of his illegitimate children. That's her, right? That's the child that he had with the maid. That would make her illegitimate. So this child that he's moving to the Carolinas and America with is our Anne Bonny. All right. That'll work. What a crazy start to life. What a crazy fucking thing. All right. I'm gonna need another drink here in a minute too, but I think we can make it through a few more paragraphs, and then I'll grab a drink. Okay. All right. So the wife found out, right? Cut him the fuck off of his allowance. The husband got pissed off, thought he would have revenge on her by bringing the maid into his house to live with him publicly as a family with the child. Caused a huge scandal, but all of his turned on him. He lost his law practice. Nobody would fuck with him. And now he, the maid, and their daughter, Anne Bonny, are moving to the Carolinas in America. All right, here we go. At first, he followed the practice of law in that province, but afterwards fell into merchandise, which proved more successful to him, for he gained it by what does it say? By its, yeah, this is a weird way to say this. Let me think of a better way to say this. Proved more successful to him, for he gained it sufficient, we'll say, to purchase a considerable plantation. Okay, so he started off practicing law, then he fell into merchandise, so he was selling goods. And he has now bought a considerable plantation. His maid, who passed for his wife, happened to die. Fuck, man. And after which his daughter, our Anne Bonny, now grown up, kept his house. She was of a fierce and courageous temper, wherefore when she lay under condemnation, several stories were reported of her, much to her disadvantage, as that she had killed an English servant maid once in her passion with a case knife while she looked after her father's house. But upon further inquiry, I found this story to be groundless. So that was just a story that was told about her. But this person, Daniel Dafoe, right, that wrote this book with all the firsthand accounts and the court cases and stuff, he looked into that inquiry and he found it to be a lie. Okay. It was certain, though, that she was so robust. Once, when a young fellow would have tried to lay with her against her will, she beat him so bad that he was in the hospital for a long time. Good for her. Good for her. So we know so far she has a fierce and courageous temper, and we know that some guy tried to fucking grape her, and she beat the fucking shit out of him and put him in the hospital. Good for her. While she lived with her father, she was looked upon as one that would be of good fortune, wherefore it was thought her father expected a good match for her. But she spoilt it all, for without his consent she married a young fellow who belonged to the sea and was not worth a groat, which provoked her father to such a degree that he turned her outdoors, upon which the young fellow who married her, finding himself disappointed in temptation, shipped himself and his wife to Providence, expecting employment there. Oh, he fucked up. Yeah, no, he fucked up. Now, I should mention that Anne Bonny is 100% a teenager right now. You know, this is like 17, what, 18-ish, 19-ish, if I remember correctly. It should be a right about that time, 17, 18, 17, 19. So she got married to a sailor against her, without her father knowing. Her father was super rich. All he wanted was for her to marry somebody else that was like of their class, right? And then he was going to give her everything. It says they all saw her as becoming a woman of fortune. But she married this fucking sailor without her knowing, or without her father knowing, and he freaked the fuck out and kicked her out of his house. Gave her nothing, just fucking kicked her out. So now this sailor that she's married to is obviously disappointed. He thought by marrying her, right, her father owns this huge plantation. He thought he was marrying into money and everything was going to be all right. He's disappointed. And he decides they're going to go to the fucking Nassau. And he's going to try and find legal employment. And we're all thinking the same thing. Boy, you're fucking up. You're taking your wife to a pirate kingdom is what you're doing. You're a fucking idiot. Here, she became acquainted with Rackham, the pirate, who, making courtship to her, soon found means of withdrawing her affections from her husband so that she consented to elope with him and go to sea with Rackham in men's clothes. She was as good as her word, and after she had been at sea for some time, she proved with child, and beginning to grow big, Rackham landed her on the island of Cuba, and recommending her there to some friends of his, they took care of her till she was brought to bed. When she was up and well again, he sent for her to bear him company. Now remember, when we were telling Jack Rackham's story, right after he got his first ship, right, and like literally right in the first paragraph after he got a ship and crew together, they said they sailed for a small island off the coast of Cuba where he kept a small family of sorts. Well, now we know who that small family of sorts was. It was fucking Anne Bonny. She had given birth to their child, right? So she goes to Nassau. Remember, she married this guy. She's living in the Carolinas on a huge plantation. For all intents, her father's rich, so she's doing fine. She just maintains the house. She's a teenager. Right? Literally like 15, I think, 15, 16, something like that. She marries a sailor without her father knowing. He finds out, kicks her out of the house. This sailor takes her, his new wife, to Nassau. Okay, Jack Rackham meets Anne Bonny and says, yo, your wife's or your husband's a fucking poser. He's a fucking bitch. Why don't you get with me, right? I'm a badass pirate. I'll take care of you. Everything will be great. People around here respect me. She goes, cool. She leaves her husband, right? She left her husband, eloped with Rackham. And because women weren't allowed on ships, she dressed in men's clothes and went on board with him. They went pirating. She was a badass pirate. She's known, we've already talked about that, right? And we just got a dose of it in the married story. They talked about how badass Anne Bonny was. Well, Jack Rackham gets her pregnant. They have a child, but he puts her on a small island in Cuba with some friends of his to look after her until she's given birth. And then he sends for her, and she comes back, and she goes pirating with him, leaves the child in Cuba with their friends, and she comes back and goes pirating with Rackham. All right. The king's proclamation being out for pardoning pirates, Rackham took the benefit of it and surrendered, afterwards being sent upon the privateering account, as we heard about in the last story. That's when he returned to his old trade, right? That's when Mary Read, remember, she was on a different boat. And her people all turned pirate again, too. He's one of these pirates that took Woodes Rogers up on the job of privateering so they could get out on a ship, and then they just took the ships over and went pirating. Okay. So here she became acquainted with Rackham the pirate, who, making courtship to her, soon found means of withdrawing her affections from her husband so that she consented to elope with him and go to sea with Rackham in men's clothes. She was as good as her word, and after she had been at sea some time, she proved with child, and beginning to grow big, Rackham landed her on the island of Cuba, and recommending her there to some friends of his, they took care of her till she was brought to bed, or gave birth. When she was up and well again, he sent for her to bear him company. The king's proclamation being out for pardoning of pirates, he took the benefit of it and surrendered. Afterwards, being sent upon the privateering account, he returned to his old trade, as has already been hinted in the story of Mary Read. In all these expeditions, Anne Bonny was right by his side, right? And when any business was to be done their way, nobody was more forward or courageous than she, and particularly when they were taken, she and Mary Read, with one more, were the only people that were still upon the deck as before being told. Her father was known to a great many gentlemen, planters of Jamaica, who had dealt with him in the past, and among whom he had a very good reputation. And some of them who had been in Carolina remembered to have seen her in his house, wherefore they were inclined to show her favor. But the action of her leaving her husband was an ugly circumstance against her. The day that Rackham was executed by special favor, he was admitted to see her, but all the comfort she gave him was that she was sorry to see him there, because if he would have fought like a man, he wouldn't have needed to have been hanged like a dog. Dude. She was continued in prison to the time of her giving birth, and afterwards she was reprieved from time to time. But what has become of her since we cannot tell. Only this we know, that she was not executed. So we know a little bit. That's the end. That's the story of Anne Bonny. So let's just go through the very end of that again, though. We know that the ship got busted, and we know how, but we'll go through it one more time. We read it with Rackham, then we just read it with Mary Read, right? They were all on the same boat. They were all arrested together, right? Jack, Rackham, Mary Read, Anne Bonny, all arrested together, same time, same boat. Okay. When they were arrested and put on trial, remember, she's from the Carolinas. Her father is a fucking rich guy that owns a big plantation and does a lot of business with a lot of people. Some of those people that he does business with are also gentlemen and also planters in Jamaica, right? Where this is happening. And remember, Nassau, right, is in the Bahamas. Jamaica, those people, if you're not killed, right, say you get arrested in Nassau, the people that were on that boat got split in two. It just depended on how many people there were, or like who had court open. It was you could either be shipped off to Port Royal in Jamaica, right? Or you could die there in Nassau. Some of the people that got arrested, if you don't remember, you can go back and listen to the Rackham story again. But a lot of the pirates that got arrested on this ship were split in two. Some of them got sent to Port Royal to go on trial, right? Some of them got put on trial right there in Nassau and were hung there. Rackham was one of the people that got sent to Port Royal. But they're saying here that he got to see her first because he was the father of her child. She was pregnant. But let's go through this. So she gets put on trial, okay? These planters, these gentlemen, these business people that know her father see her and they recognize her. And they're like, oh, shit, right? They're like, yo, that's Anne Bonny, right? We know her father. We got to step in for her, right? She's pregnant. We can't let nothing happen to her. We're rich. We're gentlemen. We're landowners. We get what we want, right? That's just the fucking way it was back then. So they stepped in. That's what it says. Her father was known to a great many gentlemen, some of them planters of Jamaica, who had dealt with him, and among whom he had a very good reputation. And some of them who had been at his plantation in the Carolinas remembered having seen Anne Bonny in his house. Wherefore they were inclined to show her favor, right? So they saw her arrested for piracy, very pregnant. And they said, we got to step in. We know her dad. He's a good dude. She comes from good stock. And they stepped in. So the day that Rackham was executed by a special favor, because he was the father, and remember, these gentlemen planters, they arranged for him to be able to see her to say goodbye, right? The day that Rackham was executed by special favor, he was admitted to see her. But all the comfort she gave him was, right, this is, so the only thing she said to Rackham was, right, they pulled this special favor so Rackham could come see Anne Bonny because he's the father of the child and he's about to get executed. So they arranged for him to come see her, probably thinking she would be happy and want to say hi and fucking love you, and that sucks. But what she said to him was, I'm sorry to see you here, but if you would have fought like a man, you would not have needed to have been hanged like a dog. That's fucking intense, man. She continued in prison until she gave birth. So they gave her some time. And she continued in prison after her birth, but afterwards was reprieved. What has become of her since, we cannot tell. Only this we know, that she was not executed. Well, no one ever found out who Anne Bonny became. But they found out that they changed her name and moved her, right? More than likely, she went back to the Carolinas to live in her father's house, but nobody ever saw her again. Now, in the 1700s, pretty easy. All you had to do was just not really go anywhere outside your town, right? Or write a book. You know what I mean? So the only thing we have in history is the rumors that they changed her name and that they moved her back to the Carolinas. Now, this book was written in the 1700s, so at that time they had no idea. It just says, what has become of her since, we cannot tell. We know she was reprieved, and we know that she was not executed, which was true, obviously, but they didn't know what it took us 300 years to hear the rumors of, right? Which is that they most likely changed her name and they just moved her and her baby to the Carolinas. Now, I'm assuming she also took the other child. Now, think about this. She had a child in Cuba, right? I'm sure on her way home, she stopped and picked up her other baby, because both of those children had the same parents. You understand what I'm saying? Both of those children, their parents were Anne Bonny and Jack Rackham. Think about that shit. Somewhere there are human beings walking around who have the direct lineage as like great times whatever great or grandparents, right? They're great times whatever great, say they're like fucking 6 greats, right? Or 4 greats. Great grandfather and grandmother are motherfucking Jack Rackham and Anne Bonny. How cool is that? And I wonder if they know, right? Because she changed her name. She might have, I mean, I'm sure they weren't telling people that shit, right? They might have had a totally and completely different story. But maybe she left somebody a letter, like for her death, right? Maybe she told on her deathbed or something. I don't know. Pretty incredible, though. Pretty incredible. Did they arrange for whose death, Mandy? Are you talking about Jack Rackham? He was convicted of piracy out now. He was a very, very well-known pirate in Nassau. He was the quartermaster for Charles Vane. Charles Vane was a piece of work. He was a very respected pirate. Remember the show we did on him when Woodes Rogers showed up? He was part of the pirate kings in that pirate kingdom. He was one of the captains that had the army with him that was going to fight Woodes Rogers. But when Woodes Rogers showed up, all those pirates punked out and took the pardon. Charles Vane was the only captain of the only crew that said, fuck this. If you're not going to fight with us, we are going to leave, right? And we're just going to fucking cut ties with all of you guys. They jumped on their ship, set fire to other boats in the bay, and they were literally, they hoisted their colors they put the pirate flag up, right? They hoisted their colors and they started shooting at Woodes Rogers and the other boats as they left the bay. Jack Rackham was that guy's quartermaster. So he was very well known. They called him Calico Jack. And we read, remember if anybody hears this now that didn't hear the Jack Rackham episode, you can go back and listen to it. But they called him Calico Jack because of his father and his father's trade, and the way that he would dress. If you see, I've mentioned before the show Black Sails, they have Jack Rackham dress a certain way. It's actually very, very mild and kind of like dumbed down version of the way we hear in history how Jack Rackham really dressed, which was very vibrant and wild and audacious. But it's because of his father and his father's trade and his father's history with all of that. But yeah, so no one arranged Jack Rackham's death. He got executed for being a pirate, remember? And then they took his body and hung it in chains at the fucking mouth of Port Royal on one of the small little spits of sand in the open bay of Port Royal. Well, the first baby she had in Cuba, Mandy says, any chance she had to be in Cuba? No, the first baby she had in Cuba, right? So she was with Jack. She came from the Carolinas with her sailor husband to Nassau. She met Jack. Pirate married Jack Rackham, right? Was his wife, but like his pirate, they got married at sea, on a ship. He got her pregnant. He dropped her off with some friends on a little island near Cuba where she gave birth and then left the baby with her friends there and went back pirating with Jack Rackham. Towards the end, she got pregnant again, but they were arrested. She was very, very pregnant at trial. Now, remember, Anne Bonny and Mary Read went on trial at the same time, and they were both pregnant. Think about that. The two most well-known female pirates were pregnant at the same fucking time at trial. But yeah, Anne Bonny had said in the end of the story that she gave birth to that baby in prison, right? She gave birth to that baby in prison, and then shortly after was given her reprieve, and then she and the baby disappeared from history, right? But again, we can only assume those very rich gentlemen, friends of her father, made sure that she made it safely back home. We can basically assume she just went back to her father's plantation in the Carolinas. I was saying that I'm sure she picked up the other child that was still in Cuba at the time, right? Remember, she left the baby there with their friends, went out pirating. They would go back there every now and again, see the kid, but they were still out pirating, and they left the kid on shore. When she finally got her reprieve and she had given birth to her second child, when she was being sent back to her father's house, I'm positive she would have stopped into Cuba and got her other child. And what I was saying to you is those children, both of those children, the one that was born in Cuba and the one that was born in prison, both of them were Jack Rackham's children, right? So the lineage of those children is insane. Their mother was Anne Bonny and their father was Jack Rackham. That's fucking insane. And I'm wondering aloud, did Anne Bonny tell her children at some point in their life so that they knew who their father was? Did she keep that from them? Are there people on Earth right now that know they are the fucking direct progeny, no matter how far removed? I wonder if there's people that know they're the offspring of Anne Bonny and Jack Rackham. That's pretty wild. Damn it, Mandy says Witsec. Yeah, kind of, right? I mean, back then, that kind of thing was really easy. All you had to do was go by a different name. And to our point, that's what they said, that they would have changed her name, but she would have just gone back to her father's house, right? They just wouldn't have told everybody all this shit. She probably just went by a different name with most people. Anybody that didn't know who she was, that would make sense. Yeah, let me get up here real quick. I'm going to check something out. Okay. Yeah, cool. Let's see. We've got a few more. I'm thinking I might switch over to William PA next week. We'll kind of go back and forth. I kind of want to get into that next, because those are a lot of really, really cool stories that I've been wanting to get into for a while. And I also want to cover that other perspective of Panama, and that's going to lead us into the short story by our third firsthand written down, like actual firsthand account, not a firsthand account given to somebody else to write down with a bunch of other things. Lionel Wafer is another firsthand account of a pioneer, what the fuck am I saying? A pirate who sailed with the original Buccaneers and stuff like that. So I think we are going to put the Pirates of Nassau on pause, come back to them. We've got another half dozen of them. But I think we're going to put them on pause for just a little bit. Next week, we're going to get into William Dampier, our pirate scientist. And this guy has so many fucking cool stories. So many cool stories. Sailed with so many cool people. And even when he was just going about his regular business, when he wasn't pirating, he sailed with some really cool people and is attached to some very, very cool people. If you've ever heard the story of Robinson Crusoe, right? That's a real guy. That wasn't his name, but that's a real man in history, right? That's a real story. And William Dampier was on the ship that dropped him the fuck off for being a prick, right? William Dampier was on the ship that kicked this dude the fuck off and left him on an island, right? And just by total and complete chance, he was also on the boat that took him the fuck off of the island and rescued him later. When I tell you that, like, William Dampier has so many cool stories that'll blow your mind that are connected to things from history you might not even have imagined, just wait. And that's why I say I can't wait to get into that. So I think we're going to jump right into William Dampier, and that again will lead us to our third account, and it will give the account of how Alexander Exquemeling, the first author, right, the first book that we read. Remember, I told you Dampier and Alexander Exquemeling were very, very good friends. So in William Dampier's stories, we actually not only get stories of them talking and being with each other on some of these pirate missions, which is very cool in itself, because it gives you somebody else's perspective of a personality of whose book you've read, right? But you also get tales of him when he came back to the pirate trade, and William Dampier was there when he died, and he's fucking heartbroken when it happens. It's like it's his fucking homeboy, you know what I mean? Like his really good friend that he's known for a very long time and has been through some insane pirating and raids and shit with. And but we get the story, the first-hand account, the story from Exquemeling's friend of the day he died. So it's very, very cool. So we're going to jump into William Dampier next week. It'll either be Monday or Tuesday. I'm not sure which yet, but those seem to be like the best days for me to do these pirate shows usually. So next Monday or Tuesday, we will come back with Ep 10, and we will jump into the stories of William Dampier. Now, before I go, I will tell everybody that's here and anybody that's listening later, thank you, Mandy. I appreciate that. This is such a good series. And thank you. I love your background. I appreciate that too. But yeah, so before I leave, like I said, we will be back for episode 10. We'll jump into William Dampier next week, Monday or Tuesday. I'll put something up. But also, for anybody listening later or listening now, we will be doing, obviously, the Skullbro show on Friday night. So tune in for that like you always do. Get your dose of your weekly dose of insane news and trash on blast, and all the Diddy's and R. Kelly's and Keefy D's and weird shit that's going on, and like a little bit of current news that's not totally insane, just current events type stuff. But we always have a good time on the Skullbro show, so we'll be doing that Friday at 10:30, like always. But on Saturday, Aegon-ish, we're going to be doing, we're going to be covering CERN and how CERN killed us or flipped us into a dimension in 2012. And we're going to be covering the Mandela effect, which is directly tied to us skipping through frequencies or dimensions because of what CERN did to us. So that's going to be our Weird-ish with Aegon and RatTrap and Aegon. We will be doing Weird-ish this Saturday night at 10:30. So tune in for that if you're into, like, you know, weird stories of shit that could be true, might not be true, right? If you're into conspiracy theories and aliens and, you know, all that kind of stuff, then Weird-ish is where you want to come check it out. We go through like UFOs and Egypt and all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories on Weird-ish. So we haven't done one in a while. So if you're listening now or listening later, like I said, come check us out Friday night for the Skull Bro show, and then definitely check out Saturday night at 10:30 for a Weird-ish. We haven't done it in a while, and we've been looking forward to doing another one with everybody. So come and join us Friday and Saturday, both at 10:30. Friday Skull Bro show, Saturday Weird-ish with RatTrap and Aegon. So I will see everybody. Oh yeah, we're all dead. Yeah, Mandy. No, not really. But I mean, that's one of the theories, that we all died in 2012. But the theory that Aegon and I subscribe to is slightly different from that. So join us Saturday at 10:30 for Weird-ish, and you will find out everything that Aegon and I have to say, and find out what we think about that matter. It'll be fun. Yeah, it's going to be fun. And I think everybody's going to enjoy the Mandela effect part of it anyway. I think everybody's going to be able to relate to a handful of things. Usually most people can and do relate to at least a few things on the list that we'll be going through of the different Mandela effects and the people that seem to be affected by them. So, yeah, David James, I'll see you on Friday for the Skull Bro show. We'll definitely get into the Diddy stuff. There might be a verdict tomorrow, so we may I told MRE the verdict comes in, I would hit him up in a message, and if he's free, go live and do a small show. So there is a chance that if there's a verdict tomorrow, there's a chance MRE and I might pop in for a hell chat tomorrow night to go over that and cover that real quick with everybody. If MRE cannot join me tomorrow night and there's a verdict, I will still pop on real quick. I'll just do a much shorter show just to kind of let everybody know what happened. And then MRE and I will cover it in full on Friday like we always do. So, yeah, you'll see it. It'll pop up in your feed if we go live tomorrow. It'll pop up. And if you hear there's a verdict, right? If you hear tomorrow that there's a verdict, then just assume that you're going to see something pop up on this channel, whether it's MRE and I or just myself, for a very, very quick rundown. And then either way, we'll be covering it on the Skull Bro show Friday if you can't make it. So thanks to everybody that came through tonight. Definitely hit the like button. I appreciate it. Leave a comment maybe about anything you found surprising or shocking, or anything that stuck out to you at all in the stories tonight we told of Anne Bonny and Mary Read. You know, I love talking to everybody about this stuff, so definitely don't hesitate to leave a comment. Always look forward to talking to everybody. But definitely click the like button one way or the other. It helps the algorithm gods know that we're here and alive and kicking. So I appreciate everybody that came through, and we will see you all soon. Later.